Kingdom of Norway. His Excellency Professor Mario Draghi, President of the Council of Ministers of the Italian Republic. Her Excellency Ms. Kaja Kallas, Prime Minister of the Republic of Estonia. His Excellency Mr. Alexander De Croo, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Belgium. His Excellency Mr. Kyriakos Mitsotakis, Prime Minister of the Hellenic Republic. The Right Honourable Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Her Excellency Ms. Mette Frederiksen, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Denmark. Her Excellency Ms. Katrín Jakobsdóttir, Prime Minister of the Republic of Iceland. His Excellency Mr. Antonio Costa, Prime Minister of the Portuguese Republic. The Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada. Son Excellence, Monsieur Xavier Bettel, Premier ministre du Grand-Duché de Luxembourg. His Excellency Mr. Edi Rama, Prime Minister of the Republic of Albania. His Excellency Mr. Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. His Excellency Mr. Viktor Orbán, Prime Minister of Hungary. His Excellency Mr. Zoran Milanovic, President of the Republic of Croatia. His Excellency Mr. Gitanas Nausėda, President of the Republic of Lithuania. His Excellency Mr. Egils Levits, President of the Republic of Latvia. Her Excellency Ms. Zuzana Čaputová, President of the Slovak Republic. His Excellency Mr. Stevo Penderovsky, President of the Republic of North Macedonia. His Excellency Mr. Milo Đukanović, President of Montenegro. His Excellency Mr. Rumen Radev, President of the Republic of Bulgaria. His Excellency Mr. Andrzej Duda, President of the Republic of Poland. His Excellency Mr. Klaus Werner Iohannis, President of Romania. His Excellency Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of the Republic of Turkey. Son Excellence, Monsieur Emmanuel Macron, Président de la République française. Honorable Joe Biden, President of the United States of America.
1. Excellencies, generals, ladies and gentlemen, we ask you kindly to take your seat as leaders are about to enter the room. Many thanks.
So, dear friends, I think we're ready to start. So, we will open this meeting in just a short moment, if you can find your seats. So, if you all can find your seats, then we can start. Okay, good morning. Then I think we're ready to start. It's good to see you all, and welcome to this NATO summit, graciously hosted by Spain. This summit will take important decisions to strengthen NATO in a more dangerous and competitive world, where authoritarian regimes like Russia and China are openly challenging the rules-based international order. We will agree NATO's new strategic concept, the blueprint for our future security. We will further strengthen our deterrence and defense with more forces, increased readiness, and stronger capabilities. We will make sure that our alliance is properly resourced to face new security challenges. And we will strengthen our partnership in our close neighborhood and across the globe. We will demonstrate that NATO's door remains open by inviting Finland and Sweden to join our alliance. We will adopt a more comprehensive assistance package for Ukraine and sustain our unprecedented support for the country's self-defense to ensure that Ukraine prevails. I'm glad that President Zelensky is joining us today. The bravery of the Ukrainian people and armed forces have inspired the world. NATO allies continue to stand with Ukraine. We meet at a pivotal moment, and our Madrid summit will be transformative. The decisions we take will define our security for the decade ahead and will enable Europe and North America to keep our alliance strong, our people safe, and our partners close. Let me now invite our host to say a few words. So, Prime Minister Sánchez, Del Pedro, please you have the floor.
Thank you, Jens. It is an honor to welcome you to Madrid in such a relevant occasion. Es un placer poder acoger a los 30 aliados de la OTAN y a sus socios, a las instituciones europeas y a los 8 países invitados a la cumbre. Además, otros 7 países participarán en distintos actos organizados en los márgenes de esta importante cumbre de la OTAN. Esta noche también nos van a acompañar los países de la Unión Europea que, aunque no forman parte de la OTAN, comparten nuestra visión y nuestra determinación para garantizar una seguridad común. The decisions we take over the next 2 days will shape the future of our alliance for the next decade, as well as our capacity and means to successfully address the challenges in front of us. It is time to strengthen our alliance. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the presidents of Turkey and Finland and the Prime Minister of Sweden for the agreement they reached yesterday. It will open the door to the accession of 2 important democracies into our alliance, having met the security concerns of all allies. I would also like to thank Secretary General of NATO for his role in this process, dear Jens. The entry of Sweden and Finland in NATO is an opportunity, an important milestone, and I'm convinced that it will make us stronger.
Nos hará más fuertes.
Queridos amigos y amigas, es una gran responsabilidad acoger la cumbre de la OTAN, pero también es un gran orgullo. Estoy convencido de que nuestras discusiones van a ser fructíferas y que vamos a demostrar que estamos a la altura de las expectativas depositadas en esta cumbre. The world is looking at us. Let us show...
El mundo nos mira, demostremos nuestra unidad y cohesión.
Thank you so much, Pedro.
Gracias, Pedro. Gracias también por tu liderazgo y por tu compromiso tan firme para con la OTAN, para con la Alianza Transatlántica. También gracias a España por todas sus contribuciones para mejorar nuestra disuasión y defensa. Con esto damos las gracias a los medios de comunicación por su presencia aquí en el principio de la reunión y si les parece seguimos en unos minutos.
There is a need not only to have those kind of standards and requirements and security, let's say, by design. So security-centered world. Imagine when we are talking about quantum cryptography or smart cities or even digitization of energy infrastructures, these kind of IoT scenarios where it touches everyone's life. So there the alliance, this kind of public-private partnerships, the kind of triple helix alliance between the private, the public, and academia, society at large is very important. When it comes to financing innovation, I think if we do not see the need for patient long-term capital in funding deep tech, which is the disruptive emerging technologies that will lead us to reshape the future, I mean, of course, it's capital intensive. It needs exactly patience, and we need to bet on the actual talent that can scale. So there we need to pull in large-scale public investments that can be like mixed funding. It can be a mix of grants, a mix of equity, or even venture capital funds. So when it comes to the EC, the European Union is becoming very, I think, ambitious now, because it's always being seen as a kind of regulatory power for the digital age. So betting on the ability to regulate and to put democracy at the center of the future vision of technology. But now, obviously, we understand we also have to compete on technology and innovation capabilities, and that's why we created the European Innovation Council, which has a 3.5 billion venture capital fund. This is the first time that the Commission does something like this, and also 1.2 billion in mix of grant and equity funding for deep tech scale-ups. And another initiative that's very important to me and ambitious, which is the European Technology Champion Initiatives, which is a 10 billion multi-partners and multi-governments fund, which is managed by the European Innovation Funds with 16 governments that are already part of it. And the ambition is to create the next 100 VC funds in Europe to grow deep tech champions. And I think this is a great opportunity because we can then create this pan-alliance innovation ecosystem where we bring together, of course, the defense capabilities, because it has to be built with security, ethics, and the capacity to protect our citizens in mind with standards that we need from the security community, and then public investment that can leverage 3 or 4 times private investment. And that's, I think, where we're going to have a real capacity to protect our industrial capacity, our industrial base.
So we've been talking a bit about the gaps that NATO as an alliance has in terms of tech, but from the EU and from the US in the fight against in the war in Ukraine, we have seen some sanctions against Russia on the technology front, and I was curious to get your thoughts, David. What are we seeing in terms of impact already on the ground in the war there?
Well, we're either already seeing the impact or we will be seeing the impact very soon, because especially the ban on sophisticated semiconductors is going to have a huge impact on the production processes, the production lines of military equipment in Russia. So with sanctions, you always hope to expect that within 24 hours they will kick in. They don't. It takes time. But in time they will hurt. And in specific technologies, it will be very hard for Russia to build up that capacity on their own. Of course, apart from the West, there are other producers, and of course China is a big upcoming player in this field. But it takes time to change your production processes. So I think we will see difficulties on the Russian side as a result of these sanctions. At the same time, it is heartening to see that innovation on the Ukrainian side has taken a huge flight. Kasper already mentioned the cyber attacks, and Microsoft has done some great work in mitigating the attacks and moving Ukraine to the cloud. So just as an example of the role that the private sector nowadays plays in these kind of conflicts. But we can all now sing along the Bayraktar drone song as an example of new technologies, rather cheap technologies if you compare it to a fighter jet, that are having a huge impact on the ground in Ukraine. Or the use of artificial intelligence language processing to translate all the intercepted Russian communications and then search for different worlds. The use of facial recognition to identify the human rights violators in Bucha. It is a great example of a whole of society effort that is now going into keeping Ukraine safe and upgrading and innovating their military as they fight. Now, I'd rather have we don't wait for a conflict like that, but learn from what we see and make sure that we institutionalize that cooperation between the private sector, academia, and the government in order to provide safe technology, rightly said by Francesca, based on our values, because that is what distinguishes us from our adversaries, is that we are democratic nations, we have values and principles, and these need to be translated into our new technologies as well.
Should we check in with Kasper to get his thoughts on the war in Ukraine, especially on the cyber front, and also just more broadly, you know, where can NATO as an alliance improve on the cyber front? Microsoft had a report recently about Russian cyber espionage. I'd be curious to get your thoughts, Kasper.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. But I think again, we have a situation where there has been sort of a pre-Ukraine and a post-Ukraine approach to how we look at cybersecurity. And there's nothing new about cybersecurity. I think most of us have been arguing for many years that this is a threat that we have to protect ourselves against. I think what we've seen now is the coming together of cybersecurity attacks together with kinetic activities on the ground at a scale that we perhaps haven't seen before. And I think the sort of foundational conclusion in this is that we have a hybrid warfare in Ukraine, perhaps at a level we haven't seen before, and the response to that has to be a hybrid response as well that involves also the private sector. And you mentioned before some of the work that we've been doing. I think it's fair to say it hasn't been particularly easy. One of the reasons it hasn't been easy is because many of the Ukrainian authorities were actually hosting their data sets or their infrastructure on premise, in other words, having servers in the basement that were easier targets also for Russia and trying to knock out the sort of critical infrastructure in Ukraine. So one of the areas we've been investing a lot in is to try and migrate, in fact, 16 out of 17 Ukrainian ministries to the cloud in order to try and defend their ability to have functioning institutions and services up and running despite the war on the ground. But you point to a number I think we have an obligation as a company, similarly to what other speakers said before, about fundamentally helping to protect democratic institutions and the values of the societies that we live in. And by the way, the values that is also, the place where Microsoft originates from. And that's what we're trying to do by leaning into the situation right now.
Kevin, just checking if there's anything you wanted to add or if you wanted to jump in. Otherwise, I'll turn to Alex.
The strategic concept that we're all anticipating today is supposed to reflect a lesson learned and change how NATO thinks. And physically, when you think of traditional military hardware, the idea is that NATO shouldn't have just enough on the eastern border to absorb a Russian attack that might literally take over and invade the eastern countries, and then NATO can then figure out a solution to push back and respond. The new thinking is there will be enough firepower deployed to deter that attack to begin with. What's the cyber version of that? What's the technology version of that that you think is the future ahead, where it's not enough to just wait for those attacks and play defense as a defensive alliance, rather something new and the new strategic concept has to be put forth?
So I think the lesson learned from Ukraine, but of course also from some of the previous major cybersecurity attacks that we've seen in the last couple of years is, of course, that no industry, no government is going to be left untouched by that. And I think building up appropriate resilience is going to be critically important. I mean, in my past life, when I was still working for government, I was stationed in Southeast Asia when NotPetya happened back in 2017, almost exactly on the day we're sitting here. And I remember quite clearly how that crippled a number of very big international corporations in a way that they were unable to conduct business. And I think that was a wake-up call for some industries and some sectors. We can say very little good is coming out of the atrocities on the ground in Ukraine right now, but perhaps one of the things that we can use Ukraine to do is to build up more awareness of the need to do more. You need to protect yourself. We need to protect ourselves as a company, but we also need governments, academia, institutions to do more to protect themselves. And I think there is a technology solution to that, and of course, like many other companies, we're heavily involved in that part of it, but there is also a regulatory aspect of that where we're seeing the European Union, not least in these months, actually providing, I would say, sort of a wave of different regulations that are going to increase obligations for all of us in having state-of-the-art technology to protect ourselves against cybersecurity attacks. There might be another aspect to this, which I think is interesting when we look at NATO and the discussions that are ongoing, which is sort of the more normative dimension of emerging and disruptive technologies. I mean, can NATO, similarly to the European Union, create a Brussels effect where you actually help set the standards around the application of new technologies in the battle space, in the military domain? And I think that's a really interesting way forward. I don't know whether that will be in the communiqué or in the strategic concept, but it might be an area where NATO could look into in the coming years.
Well, we can send it back to Madrid, and maybe David can tell us. He's from NATO. He knows what's in the strategic concept, right?
Yeah, but I can't tell you yet, because then I'll be spoiling the news coming out today. But I can promise you that all that's been discussed here is featuring very prominently in the new strategic concept. We realize that this is a critical part of the future of warfare and defense and deterrence. And to make it concrete on the normative front, we're already starting to do that, because we realize that these technologies need to go regulated, especially if we use them in the field of defense and security. So last October, for example, we published our AI strategy. So that's an AI strategy, but only focused on the use for defense and security. And a large part of that consists of principles of responsible use. And for those who work with AI, they're not mind-boggling or groundbreaking. They're about fighting bias, they're about meaningful human-machine interaction, they're about lawfulness. But these principles are key to our innovators that are working for defense and security, because they want to design technology that is actually aligned with our values and not being misused. It's key for the end users, because military end users working with AI want to have a level of trust in what the technology that they're operating will actually do. And thirdly, and that's what Casper said, the Brussels effect, it also sends a signal to all the Western companies and hopefully beyond, that these are the standards for new technology that we expect all to adhere to. So that was only AI. The strategic concept will mention that in more broader terms as one of the roles that NATO can play. We don't do hard law like the EU, but we can set standards and norms and make sure that if we at 30 or since yesterday at 32 soon agree on what we find the acceptable standards, then hopefully that will have an effect far beyond the NATO territory and make the world a safer place.
Alex, I'm curious to get your thoughts. I mean, from your point of view, where do you think NATO can improve on the cyber front? And just secondly, I mean, since we're talking about the strategic concept, we know that China will be mentioned, and we expect that NATO may call out their control of critical infrastructure. And I'm curious to get your thoughts. I mean, given that telecom is such an important aspect of that, you know, is this threat exaggerated? And I mean, if it isn't, what can NATO do to reduce that reliance? Thanks.
Okay, I would like to build up on what has been said by Casper and by David and add 3 key learnings we are having at the cybersecurity space based on the war at Ukraine. The first one is, I believe that NATO and the allies should be doing much more in terms of awareness on civil society on the threat in the cyberspace. Different research shows how the perceived threat of civilians changes significantly based on the distance to the border with Russia. But in the internet, we are all neighbors. So we are all neighbors of Russia or of China, of Iran. And you know, cybersecurity on the digital space, it's certainly a threat that should be perceived by civil society regardless of where you are geographically located. The second key learning, I'm building up on what Casper said, the move of a lot of the infrastructure that was on premises to the cloud has really made it life more difficult for the bad actors. So what we are observing in the cybersecurity space is that bad actors are going to areas or towards areas of less friction. And the areas of less friction are humans. So basically trying to replace the digital identity of politicians or executives is one of the key vectors attacks that we are observing both in APTs, in advanced persistent threat actors, and also cyber criminals. I'll give you one example. We released recently an analysis on critical infrastructure, on energy, and we discovered that 45% of the top executives of the largest 20 companies, energy companies in the world had credentials exposed in deep and dark web. And more we see how this can be weaponized and can be used to first penetrate an organization and then move laterally in order to attack these organizations. We have also some interesting examples. Bad actors like Lapsus are poaching employees of critical infrastructure companies, offering them 20, 30K a week just to provide credentials to access critical infrastructure. So I think identity is going to be definitely, as the security in the cloud increases, an area of interest. And then finally, I want to raise awareness on a third element, and Casper was talking about the coordination of kinetic action and cybersecurity and cyber action, wiper attacks and destructive attacks. We see a third element that we believe is very, very important, which is disinformation and malign campaigns. More and more, we are talking about APTs, advanced persistent threat actors in the cybersecurity space, but we are also coining a term of APM, advanced persistent manipulators. In the Ukrainian war, we have seen how Russia has been very effective crafting very divisive narratives against the allies and NATO outside the Western world, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, in Asia, and in Latin America. And that represents an important threat that also needs to be taken into account.
And on the telecom front, with the China threat, can you tell us what your thoughts are there?
Well, I think in general, and I wouldn't limit this to infrastructure. But obviously, supply chain is going to be a critical element because supply chain can be significantly weaponized. And we have recent examples. The SolarWing attacks are a very, very good example on the impact that the supply chain can have, across a country, a region, or the world. And definitely, as we jump into 5G, and we are already talking about 6G, as IoT is becoming a critical, foundation of our industries and our lives, supply chain, and that includes obviously telecom infrastructure, are going to be very, very relevant, and definitely needs to be an area of very deep focus from a regulatory perspective, but also from a defense perspective.
On the capability side, I just want to check in with Francesca, and then we'll go to questions in the room here and in Brussels. So why don't you can start thinking about them while I ask Francesca. On the capabilities side, China and Russia, I mean, how far behind is the EU and the US in certain areas? And like, what is your main concern?
I think what was said for me in the panel is very important. That is to push the higher level ethical direction and then get the democracies through also international regulation and agreements to set the principles and standards, also via experimentation, testing, standard settings, and then get the investment behind. Because I think this is our strength. Our strength is that we recognize how those disruptive and emerging technologies can bring lots of benefits. I mean, not only for the defense industry and in kind of war scenarios, but also broadly. But if they are misused, they can be detrimental to our democracy and our fundamental values. Mm-hmm. And what was mentioned, for example, threats around disinformation and around kind of pervasive manipulation of data and technologies, I think this will become also a key issue. It has been mentioned, the cybersecurity regulation, the information security regulation, the AI Act, and also what NATO is doing in that front, but also the Data Governance Act. When it comes to people will need to have trust. They will need to feel that they can own their digital assets. They can own, their data and their identity. We also have to understand, and this is linked to kind of massive digitization of people identities, payment systems, cryptocurrencies, all kinds of new services are being introduced in society. So this goes beyond, only the scenarios that we are talking about. And I think for me, this kind of vision that we may have as allied, as democracies, to make it happen with those very strong ethical direction is what I think we should use as our competitive advantage. So I don't think that, because usually we say regulation makes it slow and we need to agree all together in a democracies and we're going to be beaten because China, it's going to be faster and they're going to outperform us. But those technologies are going to be pervasive throughout society. They have to integrate to the institutions of society we have today. So if we do it right, and if we are convincing people that we may keep the open and safe society, yes, with our technological improvements, then I think we will have an edge. We will have this edge that is not only technological, because digital sovereignty is also economic, political sovereignty, and of course, the military sovereignty.
I think that's a very optimistic note to wrap up on.
We have to, because otherwise, all the rest it was said, material scarcity, food crisis, supply chain disaster, supply shock, I may say, but also, again, the data is going to be a big fight because there is a lot of power asymmetries, and we have the fight for talent also, because we need these STEM capabilities to be here. So we need to attract the more talented people. We need to be a better university, better education, better public sector in order to leverage the capacity throughout society. So the challenges are many. I think we need to be optimistic that as democracies, we can have an edge. We can have a competitive capacity here.
So let's check in with Brussels. Kevin, is there anyone in the crowd there that wants to ask a question?
Yes, I believe we have a question set up for you right here.
Hi, my name is Owen Daniels. I work at Georgetown University's Center for Security and Emerging Technology. Technology literacy is a key challenge in both the civilian and defense sectors, particularly so policymakers can know the levers that they have available to them when it comes to emerging tech. I was wondering what the panelists think about how NATO can or should promote tech literacy both within the alliance and then also among member states. Thank you.
What do you think of that right here in the room?
I think the first thing is to say I think it's a really great question, because I think you're pointing to one of the areas that I know, David, the rest of the NATO organization is focusing on, and increasingly also we're focusing on the private sector, which is to make sure that the gap between where policymakers are and where the technology is, that gap is being reduced as we go along. So actually I think one of the interesting aspects of your question is, why do we want an interface between the private sector and NATO? What's the interest for Microsoft in this area? Well, I think we have a couple of different interests. One is to make sure we help educate, a very important defense organization about where technology is today. And I'm a simple political scientist. I'm not an engineer, so it's been a steep learning curve for me to come into Microsoft and sit in front of our engineers and understand how fast the deployment and development of AI is, or quantum computing. And don't ask me any follow-up questions because I will fail completely on that one. But I think the interesting aspect is, even for those of us that are working in the private sector, we see in many ways an unprecedented pace in the development of new technologies that is going to have a profound impact on the world, on geopolitics, on the opportunities to create the jobs and the growth of tomorrow. And that requires us to work closer together. But I actually think I just wanted to come back to the point just made. One of the areas we're investing in Microsoft, but many other companies are doing the same, is in fact on skilling. And we do that for two reasons. One is a very selfish thing, which is we can't attract the number of cybersecurity experts that we need for our own business today. So to those that are a little bit younger than I am today, go into that area. There are huge opportunities in terms of employment. But the other reasons, of course, we live on the basis of trust. Now, if you don't have trust in our technology, you're not going to use our technology. And the problem with cybersecurity, and if you want me to be a little bit tedious, if you look around the room here today, because what we say is so incredibly boring, most of you are sitting with your device in front of you and probably reading emails or tweeting or doing something more interesting. And that, of course, also shows the vulnerability we have, because we are connected today, and cybersecurity is going to be one of those aspects. So in order to increase awareness, we also need to invest in skilling and developing more competences in those areas. And I know that our friends in NATO do not disagree on that one. And by the way, we're here to help together with many other companies, both on the other side of the Atlantic, but certainly also here in Europe.
So I think we'll have to leave it
back to you
with Casper. And I just want to thank all the panelists, David, Alex, Francesca, and down the line, Kevin and Casper, for this wonderful panel. Just a note to the crowd here in Madrid, we'll take a short break now. Thanks so much.
Could I just quickly... Can I just quickly add to that? We keep hearing that this is a historic NATO summit, and as indeed it is, and this is also a historic public forum, and we are now going to make history here in Spain, because this is the earliest lunch break that has ever been announced in Spanish history, okay? So we're taking a lunch break from now until 1. So please reconvene at 1, and at 1 o'clock we are very fortunate because we will be able to listen to Minister Andrej Yarmak, who is the head of the presidential office in Ukraine, coming to us live from Kiev. So take this historic lunch break, or perhaps a brunch break would be more accurate, and reconvene at 1. Thank you very much.
8, vale. Hola, sí, este es el 2, ¿vale? Hola, este es el 2 de la manguera.
Queda diadema 3, por favor.
Diadema 3, 3, 3,
Vale.
3. Hola, sí, 3. Este es el 3, ¿vale?
Diadema 4.
Hola, Diadema 4.
Vale. Tenemos aquí 5 y 6. Checamos todas las líneas. Ah. Ok.
Diadema.
Es una AUDAC. Es una AUDAC.
Hola, 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 Diadema 5.
Vale, esto...
¿Eso sobra?
Sí.
Pues...
Hola, Diadema 5.
Córtame, ábreme. El 8. 8, ábreme, por favor. David, corta el 5, que está una AUDAC, vamos a poner una DPA. Abre. ¿Esa dónde ha salido? ¿Esa que estaba allí en la mesa?
En la que estaba por ahí.
No es. Ábreme 5 y a ver qué tal. Y hola, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, diadema 5. El 5. Y 5, 5, 5, diadema 5, ¿ok? Ahora el 6.
Hola, Diadema 6. Hola, 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 AC. Hola, hola, Diadema 6. Esta es la 6.
No hemos cambiado. Espérate, te lo chequeo.
David. Ya está, David. Ya está. El 6.
Hola, hola. Hola, hola, micro 6.
Seis es este.
A que se quede la coca atrás. Diadema 5, he cambiado el micro. Ok.
Micro 7, diadema 7.
¿Qué número tienes ahí?
3.
Diadema 6. Hola, hola, hola. Diadema.
O de los puros. Todos los caminos que han salido de Camerino están chequeados. Funcionando.
Se queda el 3, David. El 3. Tú habla por el 3. Habla por ese. Habla por ahí, Edu, por el otro.
Hola, 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 hola.
Vale. Porque de la manguera. Mutea el 2. Mutea el 2. El 2.
Hello? Good afternoon, can you hear us? Yep. Yeah, I can hear you.
Estás probando desde ahí. Hello. Manu, ¿te sacan el audio si lo escucho? No, ahora. Can you hear me?
Can you hear us and can you see us?
Hello, can you hear me? No, su audio está abierto. El problema es... Sí, se lo escucha abajo. ¿Me puedes subir un poquito el audio de Zoom? Un pelo. Do you have an interpreter, an current interpreter there in your site? Hola, hola. Hola, hola. Check, one check, one check. Hola, hola. One check, one check. Hey, hey, hey.
Sorry, can you hear us?
Ah, que no nos puede escuchar.
No, ahí sí. I can hear you. Can you speak now?
Guys, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so we would like you to put, while our head of office will speak Ukrainian, to put English channel in your interpretation settings. You can see that there is a globe. So.
Okay, we are going to try that now.
Just a minute, because we need to put our interpreter. Just a second.
Okay, no problem.
Hello, these are interpreters. Hello, this is a Ukrainian interpreter from Madrid. Can you hear us or not?
The meeting doesn't, it wasn't created with the option of translation. So can you repeat the meeting with that option to send us the channel of interpreter?
You know, we would like to have our own who will be joined via the Zoom. Can we do that?
Ya estamos.
just in case. I am speaking into English channel. Do you hear me? But who is telling me if
Who is listening?
I am speaking into...
Так, во сколько пресс-конференция? 12:45?
This open remarks afternoon, это 3 часа, да, или сколько там? Боже, скажи мне, когда.
Ирочка, на посмотри.
Программку, да, я уже, ты знаешь, я так не люблю.
График. И давай, да, вот четко знаем, кто куда идет. Там большие эти opening remarks, сколько там всего? Ой, вообще нечего.
Very good? Okay, perfect, thank you.
1, 2, 3. This is English channel. 1, 2, 3, 4. English channel. Testing, testing, testing. English channel. 1, 2, 3, 4. English channel. Okay. And now agree.
Inglés, inglés, ¿vale?
Okay, can you hear us? Никого.
Yes, we can hear you. Can you
Okay, so we just need you to put English channel. There is a special globe in the settings, so you just need to choose English channel, and then we can try vice versa with our interpreter. Okay?
Okay, it's already on our English mode.
Hear the interpreter, 1, 2, 3.
So now I will speak Ukrainian, and I hope you will receive English.
Hello, I'm speaking Ukrainian right now, and I do hear that you're getting interpretation into English. If everything...
Yes, okay. English is provided. There is an interpretation into English from Ukrainian. So I am speaking now into the English channel, channel A. I hear you, yes, I hear you and I see you, yes, I hear you and I see you. Do you hear me? I hear you, the one, you're on the podium, so I see you and I hear you. So do you hear me?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I can hear you. I wanted to ask the question, is there any other interpreter together with us right now?
Well, there is an interpretation booth and I am active at the moment.
Can we ask during the presentation to use our interpreter from Ukrainian into English?
Yeah, no problem.
Interpretation? Do you hear us?
Так, я вас чую.
Yes, I can hear you.
There is a bit of delay, but we can hear you too.
Це чудово. Добре. Тоді працюємо.
Everything's perfect then. Okay, then we will work as follows. We will leave our interpreter, and I do hope you can hear the voice of our interpreter very well.
Perfect. That's good for us.
Дякую вам. Тоді пропоную залишатись на лінії. І хвилин за 10 до початку.
Then I suggest that we stay online, and then about 10 minutes prior to the event itself, we will run another test, if you don't mind.
You want to stay online until 1 o'clock?
Як ви скажете? Я би рекомендував просто виключити відео, а так можемо.
As you say, I would recommend just to turn the video on and then stay online to make sure that we don't have problems later on.
No problem on our side. We can stay online and we can communicate prior to the session. We will be punctual because it's after the break, so there shouldn't be delays.
Добре, будемо старатись. Дякую.
Yes, we'll do that. Thank you.
Just to confirm, there will be also some questions, right? Oh, he's not.
Це питання. Сподіваюсь, що зможемо відповісти на всі питання, які ви будете задавати нам.
I do hope that I will be able to answer all the questions that will come. We're just discussing this question right now.
Thank you very much.
Дякую.